Hello, my name is Brian Gainsler, and I'm a professor of astronomy at the University of Toronto, where I direct the Dunlap Institute for Astronomy and Astrophysics. And I'm very honoured to be an ally of the Canadian Black Scientist Network. I welcome you all for this last session of the third day of the BESTEMM conference, and offer a special welcome to those of you who are joining us via the live stream. This was scheduled to be a fireside chat with the Honourable Dr. Kirsty Duncan. Unfortunately, there was an unexpected emergency and she was unable to be here today. Instead, we are taking this opportunity to hear from leaders of the Canadian Black Scientist Network and the organising committee for the BESTEMM conference. We're going to hear about the origin of the network, its importance in the Canadian science ecosystem, and what comes next. Before I introduce the roundtable discussion, I want to say a bit about being an ally of the network. The 7 allies of the CBSN have all been nominated by members and confirmed by the steering committee because they're leaders who have acted in concrete ways to support inclusion in their organizations. As allies, we support and contribute to CBSN programs and continue to work to ensure our equity-deserving colleagues are always beside us at decision-making tables. So let's turn to the roundtable discussion, which is sponsored by the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, NSERC. The CBSN is grateful for their platinum sponsorship, which has enabled this conference to be such a success. Today's discussion will proceed as a Q&A, with the participants taking turns asking and answering questions, and if there is time, answering questions from the audience. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our participants. Jeffrey Yafeng is a PhD student at McGill University in Montreal, working on epigenomics. He is trainee lead on the steering committee of the Canadian Black Scientist Network and is a member of the organising committee of BESTEMM and is the webmaster for the network. Dr. Kimberly Gauthier is a cell biologist and postdoctoral researcher at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto and was a co-chair of the academic program committee for BESTEMM. Dr. Eric Lucon is a breast cancer researcher and biochemistry professor in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. He is also Vice President of the Canadian Black Scientist Network and led the organisation of the Leadership Summit for BESTEMM. And Dr. Mediane Andrade is an evolutionary ecologist and Professor of Biological Sciences at the University of Toronto Scarborough. She's a co-founder of the Canadian Black Scientist Network, serves as its inaugural president, and is the host of this BESTEMM conference. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Over to you.
Thank you for your kind introductions. I have a first question, I think one that we should very much be asking. So first I'd like to ask Mediane, why was the network found?
Thanks for that, Jeffrey. So we have our formal, I can give you the tagline from our website, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about this in a much more visceral way. Many of us for years who are professions in STEM have recognized that we are rare. I think sometimes you don't realize just how rare. For me, the realization came when I was interviewed for a paper about teaching evolution. And I was told that my comments would be anonymous. And when the paper was published, they said a Black woman biologist, tenured professor who teaches evolution. And that identified me as an individual in Canada. So that was a bit of a shock and gave me a visceral feeling for just how rare we are, Black people in the academy. Around the time of the racial reckoning of 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, many of us who had already been having these discussions informally came together online formally. And here I want to specifically cite Juliette Daniel and Tamara Franz Odendahl, who said, you know what, we've been talking about organizing for a long time. This is it, let's do it. And the reason that we did it was we decided that in the face of that kind of scarcity, the only way to speak in a way that would be heard is at a national level. Because what we're talking about here is actually making change. And to make change, despite the fact that we are extremely diverse in our interests, as you can see in this conference, in our cultures, despite the fact of that diversity, we speak with one voice in saying that Canada does have a racism problem. Canada does have a problem with bias, and it is pushing Black people out of many fields, but especially the sciences, from the time they're very young. We have data on that. And so this organization prides itself in starting from that place of data, but adding to it our personal experiences so that we can change things in Canada. And for that, we need a national coalition, and that is the Canadian Black Scientists Network. And when Eric speaks, I'll ask him to say it en français because I will butcher it, but we are national. So thanks for that question, Jeffrey. And I'd actually like to turn it back to you and just ask, why is a network important to you?
I think one very obvious answer is seeing Black faculty. Now, of course, there's mentoring and there's the idea of having models, but seeing is believing. And I think that's going to be very relatable to a lot of the audience. To me, it's also been very weird because I feel like the realization has been a bit recent, but at the same time, it's always been there. Like, don't get me wrong. I've always known that we were underrepresented. I've always known that it was not right and we should do better. But realizing that there was a certain form of problem, or at least that it entailed something very strange and wrong, was more recent, where you start looking at what's coming next and you see that there is no Black faculty. And it makes you think, have I missed something? Like, why is there no one further? So just seeing the Black scientists is a source of inspiration. But there's also a certain desire of bringing change and leaving the world better for the next generation. So I, in my own university, was a founding member of a group on EDI, so for inclusion, diversity, and equity. And this is kind of how I started to meet more Black people and how I kind of found out about this network. So the fact that I wanted to do this at my own personal level, but then I found out about an even larger group that was trying to bring this change at the national level was truly what is the most important about this group.
Thanks for that, Jeffrey. And I kind of like that idea of you kind of know something's wrong, but there's a moment maybe for many of us when it kind of crystallizes. Kimberly, do you have anything to add to Jeffrey's thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I definitely echo everything Jeffrey said as well. It does, I think, as you kind of bring you that point back of, there's something wrong. There's a certain point where you kind of start to feel the barriers and you see the barriers a bit more tangibly in front of you. And you're like, oh, okay, at what point am I going to be weeded out of the system? That's kind of how it feels. So, growing up in my family, in my community, I had a lot of like prominent Black mentors and people I could look up to. But in my education system, other than my classmates, this is definitely where it was lacking. I think all of school from like kindergarten to grade 12, I think I had a single Black teacher. I don't think I had any Black teachers or professors at all at the university level that I can remember, certainly none that were teaching me. And it wasn't until grad school, I think in my first year, it was actually like Dr. Lloydie Jerome-Majewska, who's part of our team and who pulled me into the CBSN and into the BESTEMM committee to work on this. She gave a talk in my department and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've seen a Black woman in academia my entire time here. And it was jarring how shocking that was and how much I had been missing that in my life, in my academic life, and how it felt that like my academic and my personal life were so separate that way. And yeah, that was something that really, really struck me, I think. And I didn't want to like project all of that onto her, but I definitely felt an immediate connection. And I later I was part of the organizing team for a conference at my department. So I invited her to give a talk. It was really important to me that I did that one little thing. And then we got to talking and we formed a connection that way. And so that was something that had a big impact on me, was having her part of my academic career. And then being able to access the network and having so many more mentors now that I can look up to, and being able to be part of this conference, organizing this as well, has also been pretty life-changing for me. It's been really, really great. A lot of work, but really fun. I know Mediane is like, yeah, I'm so tired. But I think, specifically to the network, I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know what I would be able to get out of this. I think networking is important in general, but I didn't know what specifically I would get from this network. And more than that, I didn't know what I could contribute either, what I would be able to give back to other students who maybe are struggling and feeling isolated, and what change I can make too. Like Jeffrey mentioned, how can I leave the world a bit of a better place than when I found it? How can I leave academia a better place? And how can I carve a better path for other people? And I think thinking back to something that Dr. Prescott Weinstein mentioned in her keynote speech this morning about being the first versus being in a group. When you're in a group, you have a better experience. And I think that being in a group, you can also make more important changes. So I think that's what the network has become for me, as a way to be able to make a better impact and way to make more important changes and lasting changes in academia.
Thank you for that. There's just so much in these. I'd love to, just before we move on, to flip to Eric, because of course, Eric, you're a tenured professor. Arguably you're already there. So I'm interested in your perspective on this. Is a network also important for someone in a position like yours? Oh, you're muted, Eric. It's that Zoom thing.
Yeah. So when you get to this position where you are, and you know that the journey has been quite long and it's all by chance. I can say I'm a full professor here. I'm a breast cancer researcher, but it's all by chance, even though I work so hard. But if I look at my journey, it just didn't happen like that. I didn't have anybody to go to. In fact, if I had somebody to go to, maybe I wouldn't be here or be somewhere else good, but not here, because everything happened by chance. So there were all roadblocks each journey, each time that I moved from one level to the other, finishing my postdoc, finishing my PhD, trying to decide, where do I go to do a postdoc? Do I stay in lysosomal storage diseases? I had absolutely no idea. So I didn't have anybody to go and to advise me where to go, right? So I was just going online, looking at advertisement, and just picked one. And that's why I went to Harvard. So I went to Harvard again by chance, because they wanted me there. Then when I went there, then I realized that, oh, I can't stay here. Why? Because I cannot bring my family. So again, by chance, I talked to my supervisor. I said, wait, I can't bring my family here. So he actually helped me to look for a lab in Montreal that I went there. Again, being in this lab in Montreal wasn't a breast cancer research lab. It was an RNA binding protein lab. So I was in this lab doing something completely different from what I'm doing today. But the project just came up, which was a side project that had to do with breast tumor kinase. And I said, okay, there's this new protein. Who wants to take it? I said, okay, I will take it, simply because I didn't have publications. I was looking for something to get publications quick, because I was generating transgenic mice, and it takes 2 years before you start even dreaming of getting a publication. So I started with breast tumor kinase, but I realized that the protein itself is quite unique, because it's overexpressed in breast cancer and not in the normal mammary epithelium. So I realized that, oh, that's something that I can take as a new research interest. I talked to my supervisors back then that, are you interested in this protein? He said, no, my lab is an RNA binding protein lab, so you can take it with you. That's how I started, and that was in 2004 that I started working. So again, that was by chance. And even getting my position at the University of Saskatchewan was also by chance, because I applied in a few places in Montreal and Quebec, quite positive. But then again, as I was excited that I got a position at Institut du Cancer de Montréal, and I was just talking to one of the postdocs, which was a new postdoc that joined the lab. And he told me that, you know what, I have a friend who got a job at University of Saskatchewan. There's a position there you can try. And I said, well, I have a position again. Why do I try University of Saskatchewan? Anyway, I decided to try. Then I came to this university and everything changed. How did everything change? Because for the first time, given who I am, for the first time, I went to a place where they wanted me. Because the position was actually offered to me and I didn't take right away. And they kept asking me to come. And even the reception at the university was so great. So for the first time, again, I'm there alone, the only Black person, but they were so receptive. Again, that happened by chance that I actually got into this university. Now, becoming a professor or having a tenured track position, once you get that position, it's not easy, because you know that you still have 3 steps ahead of you. go through your probation, become associate, get your tenure, become full professor. There's not much that you can do before you become full professor. Why? Because you're still working hard. You have to work harder, as you know. And also, you still depend a lot on other people, right, for your promotion. So now, as soon as I became full professor, that was a chance for me now to start giving back. That was a chance for me now to go back and start pick all those Erics that are out there that don't have that role model and start guiding them, right? And because of that, I started expanding my mentorship drive, even all the way down to kids that are 8 all the way to 25, which I have a bi-weekly mentorship program that goes on because of that. So I'm a full professor, yes, but why am I doing this? Because I have to give back. I want to make the road easier for everybody else. I want Jeffrey now to see me that I'm here. And we have this forum that will be seen. We can be seen. And it's going to be very, very big. It's getting bigger and bigger. It's Canada-wide, right? So no other Eric now will be back there and not having anybody to talk to, right? So that's why I'm doing this, to be visible.
That's amazing.
Everybody. Yeah.
And you're right. The network is huge.
Yeah.
BESTEMM has been a huge success, I think. We have over 1,500 people registered already. And the CBSN network itself has grown to more than 400 members, which is amazing. I think something we all started saying here at the beginning was either we're the only one in the room or there's no Black scientists around us. And now suddenly we have this huge network, which is incredible. But we know that the initiatives, the equity initiatives that go into building this conference or this network often fall on the shoulders of people of color. And we heard from Dr. Extavor on Sunday that we all have the same 24 hours in a day, the same 7 days in a week. We can't create extra time. And we also heard from Dr. Prescott-Weinstein this morning about what it has taken for her to be able to invest the time that she does into social justice and activism. So Madian, I wanted to ask you, can you talk about what this has meant for you in your career and what has to be sacrificed to achieve these great outcomes? Oh, you're muted.
Of course I am.
Yeah.
So that is an intense question. And I read a lot in the social science literature because I also do equity education in my other life and knowledge translation. And they talk a lot there about the minority tax. They talk a lot about emotional labor. They talk a lot about the unseen agenda of work that people of color have to do. And all that's true, but I find until you're actually doing it, you don't actually appreciate exactly what it means because there are only so many hours in a day. And I know a lot of people doing this work. Eric just described to you, he's doing this work. I think almost everybody I know on this steering committee is doing something else on the side to try to elevate others. And what it means is there are only 24 hours in the day. It's at a cost to your family. It's at a cost to your lab. Thank you. If my lab members are out there listening, I apologize. You haven't seen me for a couple of weeks now. It's at a cost to your health. This conference, we started it last year. It was a dream, trying not to cry because we didn't know it was going to work. And I'm on research leave right now. And I'm not doing any research. That's what this takes. I'm going to pass it to Eric because I can't talk anymore.
I was muted there for a while. Yeah, Madian, I totally understand. This is like a dream come true, but the dream came true so fast. Like, you know, you sit and you dream about this day that's going to happen. Can you guys imagine that a year and a half ago, there were just 24 people just sitting around, just thinking? But how did I come into the picture? Like how, when those founding members sat, then it just occurred to Juliet that, I've been discussing this with Eric for a long time. Let's bring him on board. We came on board. We have the same goal, the same passion. We are so passionate. We sacrifice so much to make this thing work. If you ask my lab members, and they're all watching now, they know what I have sacrificed to be here. They're all watching. They know that. So and they know what I stand for. I stand for mentorship. And that mentorship has nothing to do with even black, white, or anything, but just mentorship. But then again, I have this community that's underserved, this community that is underrepresented in everywhere, as we're going to talk more later. So it was something that I had to get involved in. I had to throw all my weight, all my energy into this to make sure that it worked. But it just happened so fast, and the support that we had, and I didn't realize how much support we have out there. The support I'm talking about, we talk about allies. And to think that one of the co-founders of this movement is Tamara, who unfortunately is not here, she traveled, but Tamara is one of the people that started this network. So I'm so thrilled that it actually worked. It's so emotional to see she just like a newborn baby, right? Just coming just like that in front of you, and you're just picking up and showing the world that, look, it's here, and it's not going anywhere. It's not going. Everybody's listening. Everybody wants to be part of it. Everybody knows the struggle that we've been through. Everybody sees the data, but we have a plan, and that plan we're going to discuss later.
And if I could just jump in again, I've got it back together again now. The concrete part of this is that organizations like this are rarely supported in the way they need to be. Shonda spoke this morning that she actually has a position where they give teaching release so that she can pursue her activist work and her equity work. This organization is all volunteers, and we have no sustained funding. We pounded the pavement for a year to fundraise for this conference because it was so important to us that it would be accessible with ASL, that it would be French, that it would be English, and that students would be free. Everything we do is tied to a grant. And when you already have a day job and you're trying to do these mentorship things, and people are reaching out to you because they have never heard of an organization like ours and they want people at the table, and you have to write a grant for every single thing you do, it's backbreaking. So what we need is for the government to recognize that a national organization like ours, which does not charge fees because a lot of our members, that would be a huge barrier. We need sustained support. We need it not to be tied to a flash in the pan or something we have to apply for every 3 months. And we need help to keep this going. We will do the work. This is not charity. We're giving you access to thousands of brilliant Black people who Canada needs for innovation and for success. So that's my piece. And I hope that that's what we see in the next, there's a few lines in this budget that I've seen. I hope that comes to pass, that we get that kind of support. So thanks for that.
Yeah, this is very interesting, because when you look at Jeffrey and Kimberly here, I'm also wondering that from your own perspective, how can you contrast how you felt about your career that's before you became involved in this network? And how are you thinking about your future now? So I know you've touched a little bit on this, but Jeffrey, you go first.
I was actually fairly optimistic about my future, a certain confidence, and I do great science. I'm in a pretty promising field, so genomics. But as I mentioned, there was starting to be a certain cynicism that was building. So first of all, academia is hard. It's hard for everyone. But when there is no Black people further along, it starts to be really hard to remain optimistic. And thanks to the network, I really feel a lot more hopeful. I know that Black scientists can make it. In this conference, I've seen more Black scientists and presenters than in my entire life. I've also seen that even outside of academia, it's still possible to succeed. So really, I feel a lot more optimistic and hopeful. And I think that even the work that we're doing right now will pave will pave a better future for everyone. So the same way that I wanted to leave something better for the next generation, it kind of feels like the network that already has faculty, by trying to leave something better for the next generation, I kind of fit within this one. So I'm really thankful for it.
Kim, so what do you think about this? What do you think the network has changed your perspective of your career path, or whatever you feel about the future?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think Jeffrey mentioned like the cynicism that you get when you're in grad school, and I can say that it amplifies when you're a postdoc. So after, something to look forward to, Jeffrey, if you continue in academia. So I guess if I were to talk about my world pre-CBSN, which is also pre-2020, and we all know 2020 was a transformative year. Dr. Asiedu talked about that, and media, and that was the impetus, the trigger to form the CBSN in the first place. So if I travel back in time to when I was first applying to grad school, I was pretty actively discouraged by some mentors that I had at the time, because there are no jobs in academia. You'll never get a job. There's no money. There's no jobs. And I was like, oh, okay, great. But I want to do a PhD. So I did. And I went into grad school anyway, thinking right away, I'm never going to get a job. So what am I doing? Then I learned very rapidly that there's no funding for my research interests. I am a cell biologist. I like to just learn how cells work. I like to do basic cell research. And my lab at the time that I was in for grad school went through a pretty rough dry spell with no funding. There was a lot of funding cuts to granting agencies, and basic sciences took a huge hit, especially model organism research, which was what I was doing with my worms. So that was a eye-opening experience as well. And I felt, okay, even if I do make it, I'm never going to have funding to do my research. So that's not great. And then there are kind of the unspoken barriers. Like Jeffrey talked about, you don't see any Black mentors or people to look up to in your desired career path. It makes you feel that, what is the road that's going to get me there? And as you start to really sense the boundaries and sense the barriers, what I felt and still feel sometimes is that I'm on borrowed time in academia, and that at some point I might be pushed out. And I don't know if that's going to happen, when that's going to happen, but that's how the road has felt. And I don't know if that's relatable for other people, but that was kind of the cynicism that was building inside of me. I think it was a bit of the isolation, but also just feeling that the barriers exist. And what is it going to cost me to overcome those barriers? Am I going to have to give something up to be able to fit in to an academic institution that was designed to exclude me? What is that going to cost me? And I wasn't sure if I was ready to pay that price. As much as I did have really good mentors who tried to reach out and tried to help me along the way, I just felt that it was more of a systemic problem that I wasn't going to be able to solve overnight. And I wasn't sure if I was going to have the support needed to be able to do that in a way that would allow me to live a life where I'm happy and fulfilling my other goals in life. But now the CBSN exists. So how has that changed my very cynical outlook? I think, like I said before, the CBSN has given me a group and has given me allowed me to work in a team, and just even putting this conference together reminds me how much I enjoy teamwork. I haven't done teamwork since undergrad, and this was really fun. As much as it was very stressful, there's a certain synergy and magic that happens when you're in a really good team. So that was really nice. And I realized also that that's something that's been missing from my academic career path. That was a goal for me in my postdoc, was to do more collaborative work, but COVID kind of made that hard to network and create collaborations. Oops. So that wasn't really able to achieve those goals so far. But that's definitely, I think that's kind of changed how I see myself as a researcher, that I want to be part of a team and I want to be building towards something bigger. There's a lot that I can do alone, but we can do so much more when we work together. So I see that both impacting how I want to do my research, but also any other career path that I might choose. Being part of the CBSN gives me that group, or one of the many groups that I think I'm going to need in my life, where I can accomplish certain goals that I want to do in life. So yeah, it gives me a more open sense, I think. And I feel a bit more that the change that would be needed for me to succeed and thrive, and for other people to succeed and thrive in academia, and not kind of do those cost measurements that I mentioned, would be possible with the CBSN. That's what I hope.
Can we go off script for a minute?
Sure.
I have a question that I would like to ask, and this is a little bit about those trade-offs. So I have a background as a vice dean. I've been doing this equity education for a while. One of the things I did was implement a new transparent process for faculty allocation on our campus that explicitly included not just EDI requirements, but how your department had educated itself to be prepared to take a faculty member who was from an underrepresented group. And so through policy, I've been working on those kinds of angles. And that's one of the reasons we invited the Honorable Kirsty Duncan, to be honest, to talk about policy and how we could affect change. But what I'm hearing, what I feel a lot, is this tension between being a mentor to individuals and trying to be an agent of change at structural levels. And so I'm throwing this out, even though it wasn't on our script, because I was once on a panel like this, and someone said, no matter what you're doing, when someone knocks on your door and it's a person of color, you stop what you're doing, you talk to them, and you mentor them. And I'll just be honest, I don't have time to do that if I'm going to make the structural changes. And it makes me feel horribly guilty. So I would love to hear from you, Jeffrey and Kimberly, but also Eric, who has managed to do both. How do you feel about interacting with someone who you can see is working on the structural pieces, but maybe you would like to have a one-on-one interaction with? Maybe we start with Jeffrey and then Kimberly and then Eric.
I think it's a bit hard. And that's a bit why I think that even the visibility is important in of itself, because mentoring is important and clearly is much more involved. But as you mentioned, it takes a lot of work on the other side, times that other people may not have. So in this way of just being visible, it allows people to get this, while not necessarily being directly mentored, just have this idea that it is possible. And also, the more visible you are, the more people are reachable. You can maybe actually find someone that's able to mentor you. Like if you create a system where you have actual mentors, it's up to you to find a specific mentor. But if it's just an environment where a lot of people are available, it doesn't necessarily need to be a mentor direct relationship as much as they are there, and a mentorship relationship just naturally happens.
Yeah.
So like an ecosystem, it's building the ecosystem. This is making me feel better already. Kim, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it definitely becomes like a tremendous amount of emotional labor too. And I'm sensitive to that. I don't want to ever put someone in a spot where they feel like they have to mentor me if they don't have the capacity for it. And I think there are a lot of great mentors available, and it doesn't have to be from the same cultural background, even it can be anyone. But I think it just takes a bit more effort sometimes to be able to reach people who maybe don't relate to you or something, so that you can still provide the same quality of mentorship. And when it comes to career mentorship, it feels like in academia, there's a lot of like secrets and like unspoken rules sometimes. And if you don't say it, one thing that comes to mind is I didn't realize how important like socializing was going to be going into grad school and being a scientist. I was like, oh, it's great, I don't have to talk to anybody. I was like, oh no, wait, I have to be really sociable and good at this, and I have to be good at networking, and people have to remember me, and I have to make a good impression all the time. That's a lot of pressure. Like those are the little secrets that I didn't know going into grad school, and I felt very unprepared. So it could have been anyone. Anyone could have just said, hey, by the way, this is how you should, this is a good way to conduct yourself, or this is a good way to speak, or this or that. Like those little unspoken rules that don't always come across. You might feel, I feel people instinctively want to mentor someone who looks like them, but if there's no one around you who looks like you to give you those little secrets, then I think it maybe comes down to everyone else kind of opening their eyes and being like, who am I mentoring? And making sure that we're sharing the load of mentoring, so it doesn't fall just on like the one Black faculty member who is also doing all the structural changes and who's a bit overburdened, I guess.
That's helpful. And I know, Eric, you and Jude Kong led a mentorship networking session for the CBSN. Maybe you have some insights on both sides, from the mentors and the mentees as well.
So we had that mentorship session, which was, everybody had almost the same story about. So everything comes back to CBSN CBSN making everybody visible, making them be able to see those role models. But even just seeing them is enough to motivate them. You don't even need to go and say, okay, let me mentor you, which is something else, which is important. But the fact is that just seeing that there are people that look like them actually motivates them to keep going. Because what happens is that many kids start and they drop off. They simply drop off because they just simply don't see it. If you don't see anybody that looks like you automatically think that the road is hard, is difficult, which is true, it can be, right? But once you see them and having this, so that mentorship network that we just had, everybody was so relaxed that I can just speak. I don't know, because you feel tense maybe in other conferences. I go to conference and I'm automatically looking for Juliet. I'm going around looking for her, texting her, where are you? And then all of a sudden we meet and we sit at the same table, you see. But I think the part about mentorship is important for sure, but anybody can mentor you. Again, if you go back to that, my little journey, the thing is that for me to be able to go in and do biochemistry and the master's in biochemistry, which was a major challenge. Why? Because I actually finished a master's in technical and medical translation at Université de Montréal. So, but I had a degree in French literature and biochemistry from Key University in the UK. Now, listen to this. So I went to Université de Montréal on a scholarship to do a master's in medical and technical translation, which was an 8-year scholarship from the Cameroon government, which I did. Now I finished from there, but I know that I'm a scientist. Now, the same university, I moved over now to the biochemistry department. And I said, listen, I want to do biochemistry. I said, but it's not possible. Well, now you're leaving from linguistics, you want to come into biochemistry, you just can't do that, right? So nobody that I can go and talk to convince them that this degree that I have in biochemistry is the same weight as the French degree, right? I'm actually a scientist, nobody to talk to. But just listen to what I did. What I did is that I actually took a flight from Montreal to the UK to Keele University to my department. They wrote a letter that I brought that letter physically to my department to be admitted. Now, if there was CBSN, if there was somebody that I could talk to, they'll advise me. They'll tell me that this is the best way to do it, to get into it. So there was just nobody. So I did that all by myself. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that anybody can actually be that role model because of all the people that I tried and nobody wanted to accept me in their lab because you cannot start, even if they admit you in the department, you still need a lab to do your research. Nobody had funding, but I just met one person, Michel Poitier, and is a person that stays like my mentor, like my hero forever, because he's the only person of all the 15 profs that I contacted that he said, I'll give you a chance, but that chance is going to be for 1 year. You've been away from biochemistry for 3 years. Come and prove yourself. Just come. Just come to the lab, and I'll just try you for 1 year. And I stayed, and I did a master's, and I did a PhD. So, and somebody who looked into you and believed in you. So it's possible out there that there are people like that. And that's why this network has allies. That's why we have Dr. Brian Gensler here, who is an ally, because allies are like those role models that don't look like you. So we are also bringing them to the network. So yes, I like the structural part of mentorship, but this mentorship you can actually find in people that are like allies. But the more that CBSN is out there, the more we'll identify many more allies that they can go back again and rescue Eric Lucon. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Oh, that was really good. But you spoke a lot about this mentorship and these opportunities. And CBSN is just that. So what do you think success would look like for CBSN 5 years from now?
Oh boy, I can go through I'll go through a few points and we'll start where we can start. Okay. 5 years from now, we're looking at CBSN. Number one, most important just to start with, that's membership. So we are close to 500 now. but you know that the number of all this youth or faculty or students or trainees that are in STEM field, they can be in 1,000, can be 1,000, 2,000 or something like that. So we want that by that 5 years that we brought everybody now under this umbrella of CBSN. See, so that would be number one. Number two would be to have that mentorship. We can have a structured mentorship. Why is it structured? Because it's like a pyramid, right? You're going this pyramid here. We have the professors up there, like myself, who is a full tenured professor. I can still mentor somebody who is still going up through the ranks, right? You know, to help them prepare their case file. The person that is below me also can help somebody who just get an earlier career professor also how to get up the rank. So we keep going down like that. But don't forget that this network, we go as far, we extend all the way down to K-12, all the way down there, because there are kids there that can be potential STEM researchers, but don't know. They don't know it. So by connecting mentors, matching mentees and mentors at different levels in a structured way, that will be good. So I want that in 5 years that we have that structured program. And that program that I'm talking about is something that CBSN will have leaders or leads and bases in all provinces that you can, if you want to find a mentor, you just know who to contact in Saskatchewan or Quebec also to do that. So that will be at the level of, so in 5 years, I would like to see then a strong and well-structured mentorship program in all provinces. That's number two. Number three, if you think about what our mission, our three pillars of our mission and vision are, those three pillars, we want that in 5 years' time that we see some change. Number one, we want to see that measurable increase in the intake and retention of Black youths, researchers and faculties in STEM. Very measurable. We want to be able to actually measure it. If you look at it today, we Blacks form 3.5% of the population, right? So if you go to kids that are between 15 and 34, they form 6% of the population, right? And those youth, you see that there are about 6% of them, 6% of youths are in school. 6% of those youths are in school. So there the representation is there. 6% of the population, they form that 6%. But as the higher you go, that's not what you see. 3.5% of Blacks in the population, but once you go now into PhD students, okay, it drops to 3%. Now you go now to faculty, it drops to 2%. Then you go now to senior positions, it starts dropping to 0.8, right? So I want to see that in 5 years' time, that gap is closing. So we want to make sure that gap starts closing, right? Slow down, and it's something that we can measure. We can be able to say that these are the number of Blacks, and we talk about Blacks in general. Talking about STEM, it might actually be even lower. And we are the ones to collect that data. Again, if we go back to our ally and Dr. Brian Gainsler, who is here today, and even Dr. Olan in our committee, who are all statisticians, they're going to help us collect that data that we really need. So another thing so we're talking again, in 5 years' time, then I would like to see those numbers move up as close as possible to that 3.5%. But something that we really measure, we have it, we can measure. We want to be able to increase the success rate of minorities, because now this touches me personally, because whether you're a full professor or not, the facts are there that if you take minorities versus white in terms of success rate for grant application, and we're talking about statistics that's coming straight out of CIHR, right? The success rate for minorities is 50%. Compared to that of the rest. So why is it there? So CIHR is doing its best to make the system as transparent as possible, but we know that there is a problem. How do we fix that problem? So I would like them they like all those funding agencies to get us involved, most of us involved, because I have a lot of ideas that I can bring to them to make sure that in that 5 years then that is that equitable practice in funding and awards. So one more thing is so one more thing that's very important also, it has to do with research, right? Because we want to be able to lobby the government so that they can at least create some funding opportunities for health that concerns us, health research, Black health research, for example, right? There are certain things that we take prostate cancer, even breast cancer, where we are overburdened. We hear about, we know about sickle cell disease, lots of them. So there are lots of things that we can do. Why not that in 5 years, we see that one of the government agencies, CIHR, has created like a Black Health Institute, research institute that will take care of all these things, because we know about our social-cultural uniqueness and stuff, and I think a research institute like that will help to address some of those Black health issues. Yeah, so there are many things that I want to see in 5 years, and even for the fun stuff that I want to see in 5 years. To tell you the fun stuff, what the fun stuff in 5 years will be. The fun stuff is in 5 years will be that imagine CBSN, that we are now 500 members. Imagine that we find ourselves at say 2,000 members. Now we come and we do the BESTEMM like we do it here, right? We do BESTEMM, it's all fun, we do sciences. But what about the other side of it? What if we organize sporting and cultural activities that we come then, because we come from these rich, different cultural backgrounds, and we have a forum that we can come together then, maybe once every 3 years or so, to just share that, just celebrate CBSN, but in a different way. Yeah, so that's something that I'm really looking forward to. And by that 2027, by BESTEMM 2027, we'll stand on stage and we'll just be going through the data. Bam, 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 bam. That's what we've done. And so it's important that we do everything that we can to change that mindset. The mindset being that we are going to make that change, right? Because nobody believe that. Nobody will believe that we can live from 24 people to 400 today, and we have this big conference with nearly 1,600 registered. So we did it, right? So it's all in here. So we have to also make sure that every member or every youth knowing that that mindset change is important, so that by 2027, then we'll have that data to share. Over to you, Mitya.
I love that. CBSN 2027. I'm going to wait for it, Eric. I'm going to look for your follow-up notes.
The pressure is on.
Yeah, the pressure is on for sure. I think that's really important. Definitely having the data, having the questions, and getting, really being able to understand and track our progress and our successes, identifying the problem and then solving it, right? That's a fantastic way to see it. And I like the outlook for the next BESTEMM conference. How about you, Marianne? What do you see 5 years from now?
I might go longer than 5 years, but I think Eric has just framed a whole bunch of amazing things that I totally agree and that are things we're moving towards. I guess if I think about it in a more sort of atomized way, I would like. So this conference has, like you said, over 1,500 registrants. 1,000 are Black identifying, roughly. 500 roughly are not Black identifying. And those are our allies who are at the table with us. And I think that's important because we want to be visible not only for Black youth, but also for youth who aren't Black. What we want to do is normalize Black people at the front of the room. And so that is a 5-year commitment that I think we can meet. We can do it through career panels. We can do it through reaching out into schools, through partnerships with groups that are already doing that. We can do that through BESTEMM. And next year, trying to solicit even more people from outside our communities to come and hear Black people discuss their research, right? That's normalizing us as researchers. The other thing is this idea about being at the table. And Eric spoke about this briefly, and right here, this might be offline, but I'm going to actually call out some people. I don't know, I don't have a relationship with CIHR so much because I'm a fundamental researcher who's not in health, but I'll tell you that we've had great conversations with NRC. Emily Harrison's been a great ally there. We've had great interactions with MyTax. Jesse Vincent Hertzkovici is our ally there. We've had amazing interactions with NSERC. Danica Gusny is our ally there. And in fact, the president of NSERC sat down with us as well. So it's these kinds of relationships in the funding bodies that are going to mean that we are at the table when they're deciding on their strat plans and when they're deciding about what type of programs actually will reach Black youth and Black practitioners and Black researchers. And so that's really important to me because right now, if one of those groups, so they have reached out to us so quickly and invited us to their tables because there was no other place where they could go and say, we want you to help us take the temperature of Black people in STEM so that we are including them in our programs. So I think we're at a time in Canada where people are interested in making change. The racial reckoning of 2020 has had an effect. We see a lot of cluster hires. Not everyone's going about it the right way. So this one I won't call out, but there are some institutions that have cluster hires that are not at this conference and that are not necessarily just sponsors, but just aren't here at all. If you're trying to cluster hire Black scientists, why are you not at this conference? You have to meet us. You have to hear about our interests because we're very diverse. So it's that kind of thing. I want us to be a fixture on the Canadian science landscape. And we do that by being at the table with the granting agencies, as well as with our institutions, and by normalizing scientists at the front of the room who are Black. So that's my dream.
And just to add to that, as far as NSEC is concerned, I was invited to their strategic planning process. It was so good to be there and to realize that things that you think that people will just know, but they don't know. Our input. So all these groups should actually try to have to have full representation on those panels, because they will never understand us per se better if we are not there to contribute. So NRC is doing a great job, that's for sure. And CERC is really doing a great job. CIHR also is doing its best. I think CIHR would definitely invite us at some point to see, because I have a suggestion myself on how I think that things can be improved, but if they invite me, I'll see it.
So I just wanted to jump in here. Brian was taking a peek in the chat for us and found a question that I think fits in really well with this discussion about NSERC and policy, just policy in general. So there's a question from Jeffrey Webster. May I inquire how we at the CBSN intend to affect change on a policy level? So maybe we can keep this conversation going a little bit more to talk about policy changes.
Media.
Sure, I'm happy. I'm all about the policy. I used to think policy was boring. Policy is not boring. Policy plus education can make change. Policy alone won't do it. Many of us are in institutions where they have and have had for decades rules about equity, about inclusion, about representation, and it has not moved the needle. And one of the reasons for that is that policy is enacted at the level of individuals on committees who are making decisions. So one of the things, and actually Brian, the way that I got to know Brian, our ally so well, is that we are co-chairs of a group called the Toronto Initiative for Diversity and Excellence, which is across the entire University of Toronto, people from multiple different divisions, mostly allies, who get together, learn the social science literature, and then educate through knowledge translation our colleagues about why special measures are necessary. We show them the data that Eric says most people just actually don't know about. We talk about why we have particular standardized ways of doing interviews and how it's important, because otherwise we do filter out people who are diverse or who don't fit the typical mold. That education piece is important. So assisting institutions that want the education piece through sort of a peer-to-peer approach is one piece. The other piece is talking about policy. And for example, I want to call out here Olin Olanian, our Statistics Canada rep. He has generated connections with Statistics Canada where we're going to help get the kinds of data that we need. In addition, Kevin Hewitt, who's our partnership lead, has already, with his Physics Canada, I can't remember what the name of the professional society is, sorry about that, physicists, but they've already done a survey to ask, where are we losing Black people in that particular field? Once we know that, then we can start thinking about policy and changes to ameliorate things at specific places that we've identified with data. So I would say it's a combination of those things. It's education and making sure as many people as possible are aware of the data and aware of the problem. And then it's sitting down with people who are actually making the policy that people on the ground are trying to implement. So it's sort of a full metal jacket.
Yep, exactly.
I was going to try to squeeze in one more question if we can.
Mm-hmm.
So we have another question here from Janelle Ponton. How do we encourage our non-Black colleagues and professors to get involved as our allies? And it can be disheartening when they show no interest in supporting us. If I can add to that, I don't know if people are worried sometimes about backlash. Sometimes you speak too loudly, and I don't know, they're worried we're going to form a union or something. Like, how do we inspire, or it's obviously an additional burden, but how do we kind of encourage that support from our allies?
So I can take a little bit of that. So from my perspective, for example, what I do is that if you see this conference has been heavily promoted in my university here, and even the province wide, it's been heavily promoted, but nobody came to me. I actually wrote to them to talk about it, and then it just went from there. So I've done those TV interviews and all of that, but the president also, since they supported this network, also helped also just to publicize the fact that there is this conference coming up. So it's gone to all faculty, it's gone to almost everybody has seen it. But then again, just to come to Kim's point, nobody has contacted me about it, even just to say, oh, we saw this or this. So I have no idea how anybody feels about it. I don't know. So nobody has contacted me to talk about it from in terms of faculty, but the news is everywhere. I have friends that have contacted me, all of that, but in terms of faculty and all of that, nobody has actually come to me to talk about it. So, but we're promoting it.
Yeah. And so you have to be careful about what I think during our equity, Black Health Equity and Curriculum panel we were talking about last night, Dr. Gaynor Watson-Creed called it institutional betrayal, when there's something on paper that isn't actually being acted on in any realistic way, which makes it even harder to deal with because it's on paper. So we said we're going to do this thing. So that's that thing again about policy versus practice. So I've been doing equity inclusion education since about, 2015, 2016. And I've learned a lot over the course of that time. It's I use a data informed approach, but some colleagues are immediately convinced by that. You show them a graph that shows you if you have a resume that has an apparently Black name in quotes versus a name that's apparently from a European background, that there's a difference in how the material is evaluated in an experimental way, that convinces some people. What I've come to learn is that it also requires some narrative. So you anchor it in the data, but you need some narrative sometimes to convince people that there's an injustice and there's actually people sitting next to them in the room who are experiencing it. So after the all through the pandemic, I actually had a podcast with U of T called The New Normal. And after George Floyd was murdered, we did a 2-episode special called Enough. And in the course of that discussion with Black colleagues, we talked about a few things, having to be twice as good to be judged equal. We talked about the fact that when our Black boy children turn 13, we have to have a talk with them about how to interact with the police so they're not killed or injured, and that happens in Canada too. And they didn't know. They didn't know. Like, that was the overwhelming reaction. So I think we need to speak these truths more frequently, even the things that we've just come to accept. We all know that we're at risk when we interact with the police. We all know that, and we just have come to accept it, and we know how to behave, right? And we need to make sure that it's more clear to others that this is an everyday thing for us. And that, I don't mean to end on a negative note, because I'd have to say that what I found is an overwhelmingly positive response of people who are eager to help and eager to take the next step in helping. So, Eric, I'm coming to your institution to give a talk in a couple of weeks.
Exactly. You're going to be here on February 5th.
14th, Valentine's Day. Get ready for a wave.
And yeah, so we invited media, and I'm in the EDI committee in the university, and I have to say my committee is really doing a great job to make that change, right? We're actually really working hard, and that's why we decided to invite Median over to talk to us a little bit more about EDI and what we can do to make that change. So over to you, Kim.
Well, thank you, Median, Eric, Kim. Well, thank you all for this very entertaining and illuminating discussion. And thank you, the audience. We've received a lot of questions and a lot of positive comments, so we really appreciate it. And now I'll turn it back to Brian.
Thank you.
Well, merci beaucoup to Kimberly and Jeffrey and Eric and Marianne for giving us some perspective on the Canadian Black Scientist Network and its origins and its future plans. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us and for all the fantastic engagement on the chat. I also want to thank NSERC again for their platinum sponsorship at the BESTEMM 2022 conference. Before I say goodbye, I'd like to share some of the highlights of tomorrow's schedule, which will be the last day of the BESTEMM conference. And we're going to switch gears from a research conference to a focus on sharing strategies for change. Tomorrow, the conference will start with remarks by Dr. Melinda Smith, which will be followed by 7 concurrent Leadership Summit panels to discuss programs for Black inclusion across sectors. This will be followed by 2 plenary sessions, one on intersections of Blackness and indigeneity, and the other on astrofutures on STEM. There's still time to register and engage with these discussions if you're listening on the live stream. Finally, we hope you will join us at the end of the day tomorrow for our award ceremony and closing celebration, where we will be presenting more than 20 awards to recognize top presentations in different subject areas, as well as conference-wide awards. We'll also hear from the Honourable Mayan Francis, former Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia. And finally, Dr. Elle Jones, award-winning spoken word poet and activist, will perform a new poem created just for BESTEMM. I hope to see you all tomorrow. Good night, au revoir.